Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tab. Glad you made it today. Today I wanted to talk to you about deception from the VA. Don't be fooled by this deception. Don't take things at face value. Dig in a little bit deeper and find out for yourself what's true and what's not, what's available and what's not. There's many different terms and different things being said and being put out there from the VA that have kind of a deceptive nature to them. And I'm going to dive into that for you because at the end of the day, if we're not taking care of each other, something went wrong. And I say it all the time and I absolutely mean it. So hit that thumbs up for me, subscribe, share with a friend, all of that good stuff because it helps to get the information out there. And each one of us has to do our part to make sure that the others of us have a clear path, right? We're blazing this forward and creating that path for those that come behind us, right? So let's dive into it. Deception from the VA. Is it intentional? Not intentional? You know what? I don't know. And quite frankly, I don't care. I don't care if they're trying to be deceptive. I don't care if they're not trying to be deceptive. The fact of the matter is that there's plenty of information out there that is provided by the VA, from the VA, for veterans that doesn't really spell out what the reality is. And it's sad because many veterans fall victim to this thinking, well, I don't qualify for anything then, and they move on because they are hearing something that doesn't sound inviting, okay? Doesn't sound like there's a path. It doesn't make any sense. And I'm going to dive into a few of these, of the ones that really stick out in my mind. And the first one I'm going to talk about is service-connected disability. We hear it all the time. Put your shoe, now, most people watching this, You've already filed a claim, you have some sort of understanding, you've watched thousands of videos. And I appreciate it and continue doing that. Imagine for a minute, or put yourself back in the shoes of you before you really had much clue of anything with regard to the VA, okay? Back when I didn't have a beard, right? So here, in this mindset of the veteran who does not understand the VA, has never filed a claim and all of that good stuff, service-connected disability. What does that ring to you? Well, if you think about it in the words that are said, service-connected disability. Okay, disabled, so I have to be disabled. Physically disabled, right? Would be one thing that happens there. The other thing is service-connected. Show me that the military caused a disability to you, physical disability to you. Now, although yes, a condition that was physically disabling that was caused by the military would be something you could file with the VA, there's plenty of things that don't require that. In fact, there's probably more things that don't require that, right? More things than just the physical disabilities that were caused by your time in the military. So that's deceiving. That is not all-encompassing and inclusive to our veteran brothers and sisters. In fact, it really narrows it down and says, if you don't meet this, go away. So they do. As evidenced by only 27% of the 16.5 million veterans are receiving some sort of VA compensation through pension or compensation on the disability side. So sad numbers, right? So service-connected disability, to me, in my own way of thinking about it, is simply a condition that you have that either manifested, was aggravated, occurred because of a whole host of different things with your military time. And that kind of brings me on to another point. We often, and I'm included in this bucket, I'll raise my hand, I do it often. I tend to often take the time frame for service-connected disabilities and condense them to the date you entered to the date you got out plus 1 year. In some cases, I'll add that in there, so I'll give myself that little piece. Still not enough, right? So I'm guilty. So from here to here, here's the window you get to work with, and it's not really true, right? So that's also deceiving. It's deceptive because it makes the individual think, well, if I had something before service, then I don't qualify for anything for that condition. And it also makes somebody think that, well, if I got out and years have went by before I get diagnosed, or that it has I didn't have any issues from this due to my service, that they don't qualify. Well, I'll tell you that, yes, of course, everything in that window, right? Did it manifest? Did it first start during this time to this time? Does that? Yeah, of course. The stuff before is did it make it worse, right? So if you came into the military with a pre-existing condition that was aggravated, made worse by your service, then yes, you can file a claim for that for VA compensation. Okay, so they do the math a little bit different. Let's just to use easy numbers, and it's not exact, but let's just pretend that you were 10% disabled when you joined, right? Let's say that they figured out what the math would have been, and you would have been 10% rated with the VA for that specific condition that you came in with. Now, let's say over your course of time in the military, that condition got worse, and now it'd be considered a 30%. The VA will give you the difference. They'll call it like a 20%. Say you were 10% when you came in, now you're 30, we'll give you 20. That's kind of how it works, loosely, but just so you're aware. So, but what's the value there? The value is that you can, A, get service connected, 2, get compensated, and 3, be able to hang secondary conditions on it. So very important. And that's all the prior to service. On the back side, the getting out piece, there's all kinds of presumptives. So there's presumptives primarily for your Agent Orange exposure, your Gulf War vets, your folks that went to Camp Lejeune for 30 days. There's a list of presumptives. And these can occur many years later and not have any tie other than the fact that I served there and now the VA has conceded that it's most likely because I served there in one of those areas that offer those presumptive conditions. So we can't say that your condition has to be within a window because it doesn't, because of these presumptives. Another one would be, there's 4 presumptives, which I recently did a video on, so check it out. The four presumptives that veterans can qualify for out of service. And you don't need to be a war kind of in theater veteran, right? A combat vet. You can just be a veteran who served in the military and you got diagnosed for one of these conditions outside of that 1 year period. So there's a list of presumptives that's 1 year for any veteran, that if you got diagnosed for any of these specific conditions within 1 year, you can put those in for compensation. Then there's 4 of them that I believe it was 3 years for 3 of them and then 7 years for 1. That if you were to get diagnosed for that out of service 3 years later, 3 years later, 3 years later, 7 years later, then you could also file for those. So again, you're not capsulating everything into one period. It's stuff before and it's stuff after service that you can actually qualify for with VA compensation. The last one that I'm going to dive into is the deception of 100% rating. Why the VA uses the 0 to 100% to identify individuals is deceptive, because the thought is, especially now, remember the you before you knew everything, right? Remember the you before you filed your claim, before you knew anything about the VA, starting to look into it, and you start reading things and you're seeing 0%, 30%, 80%, 100%, getting to 100%. Everybody wants to get to 100%. What does that mean? Well, 100% is the maximum, right? Can't go higher than 100. So if you can't go higher than 100, then what does that mean? That means that the most severe circumstances for one of our brothers or sisters, right? The person that's rolling down the convoy, gets hit by the IED, is not in a good place, comes home, and gets 100% VA. That's what that means to anybody who doesn't know any better. That's what that means. The reality is that is not what that means, because that person is most likely on the special monthly compensation rating schedule, which is a lot different than the 0 to 100. So in other words, there's 2 rating schedules for service-connected compensation. SMC will pay out over $10,000 a month on the higher schedules, where your VA 0 to 100% rating schedule. If you're not married, it's in the upper threes. If you're married with a kid, you're looking at about 4. So 4,000. So, it's deceiving to say 100% ratings because it, again, makes people self-segregate out. Well, I don't rate for that. I would never get that because I can walk, right? So these are some deceptive things that are out there from the VA and continuing to be talked about and pushed in this terminology with very little definition behind it. It's us veterans who are sharing this information and creating the definitions to share with our brothers and sisters so we don't get bamboozled, right? So let's work together to share the information. Again, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Put comments below. Get this video to spin around and get into the hands of those that need it. Remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.